An exceptionally studious and hard-working boy was born in the latter half of the 19th century to two Parisian pastry shop owners. He would get up early every day to help his parents prepare the pastries before going to school, where he excelled in all of his classes. Still, it was an unlucky start for someone who would go on to build one of the world's great fortunes. After completing his baccalaureate, which is roughly equivalent to 2 years of college, Eugene Schuler enrolled in the Institute of Applied Chemistry, where he bragged, "I succeeded brilliantly and finished first in my class." After graduating in 1904, he worked as a laboratory assistant at the Sorbonne. That appeared to lay the groundwork for a respectable but not particularly lucrative career as a university researcher. Then, something happened that would change his life forever. The owner of a large barbershop came in looking for assistance in developing a synthetic hair dye. Hair dyes were not widely used by the French women at the time, owing to the fact that the majority of the lead-based concoctions on the market were toxic and irritated the scalp. Schuler agreed to work as a technical advisor for the barber. Even so, the ambitious young man disliked the prospect of working under someone else's orders. He quickly parted ways with the barber and went it alone, experimenting with hair dyes in a rented space near the Tuileries Gardens. His initial efforts were underwhelming, but he persisted, carrying on his experiments, modifying formulas and even testing dyes on his own hair. In 1909, he established the French company of inoffensive hair dyes, a mouthful he quickly changed to Loreal, a homonym for Loreal, a popular hairstyle of the time, and a play on the word auréole, or halo. He had no idea at the time, but his small business would grow to become the world's largest cosmetics company. Schuler was indeed a hard worker with an inquisitive mind. As if running his business wasn't enough, he was constantly looking for new ways to organize industry, the economy, and politics. In his early days, he experimented with socialist ideology. He then joined the Freemasons, briefly immersing himself in the mysterious cult of intellectual humanism before leaving after 3 years. He quickly became a vehement opponent of Freemasonry, Jews, and republicanism. In the mid-1930s, against the backdrop of the Great Depression, Schuler began reflecting on his evolving economic ideas in a series of books, articles, radio chats, and public lectures. His main idea was proportional pay. He argued that rather than paying workers an hourly or daily wage, they should be paid in proportion to their output. He did in part apply this principle to his activities at L'Oreal, and it drew some interest from economists, though the scheme was never widely adopted. Meanwhile, the Third Republic, the French parliamentary regime that had replaced Napoleon III after his death in 1871, was on the verge of collapse. In a country beleaguered by strikes, militant syndicalism, unemployment, and political insecurity, the leftist Front Populaire, led by socialist Leon Blum, won a parliamentary majority in 1936 and went on to implement a slew of reforms. The 5-day work week, graduated wage increases, nationalization of the railroads and the Banque de France, and the implementation of 2-week paid vacations for all workers were among them. At the very least, the vacations were beneficial to Schuler's business. Suddenly, Frenchmen and women of all socio-economic backgrounds were flocking to the beaches to soak up the rays. Sales of L'Oreal's recently launched sunscreen, Amber Solaire, have skyrocketed. Despite the financial benefit, Schuler saw nothing positive in the new leftist policies. In fact, he despised democracy, believing that it only brought incompetent people to power. And the fact that the Front Populaire government was led by a socialist Jew didn't make him like it any better. The charismatic Cagoule leader Eugene Delangle, attracted by Schuler's ideas and no doubt his deep pockets, recruited him as a member of his group. Schuler provided financial assistance and offered space for the Cagoule at L'Oreal. While there's no evidence that Schuler was personally involved in the Cagoule's violent plots, the organization that he supported and helped to finance was. A series of assassinations, the bombing of the French Employers Association, and even an abortive coup d'etat in November 1937 were all attributed to the Cagoule. Schuler remained a French patriot in his eyes, but when he looked at Germany and Italy, he couldn't help but admire the authority, order, and efficiency that reigned there. After the German occupiers fled the country ahead of the Allied armies in 1944, Schuler had reason to regret his dubious declarations and political associations. Their departure fueled a bloody wave of retaliation, known as the Epuration, in which the resistance groups carried out summary executions of suspected collaborators, sometimes after hasty trials by people's courts, before special courts were established to hand down sentences within the framework of due process. At the end of the war, Eugene Schuler became entangled in this web of vengeance when a disgruntled former employee named him as a collaborator in a report to an official body formed to investigate business's wartime activities. On November 6, 1946, the committee imposed professional sanctions on him for furthering the enemy's designs through his public attitude during the occupation. His case was referred to the Court of Justice of the Seine Department. where he was formally charged with economic and political collusion. The war years were bloody, horrifying, and extremely difficult, with struggles from the front lines to the home front. Rationing was a major issue, with tons of supplies being diverted to the war effort. People had to get creative, and sometimes they had to go without. Take, for example, makeup and other cosmetics. While Nazi orders told women to stop wearing makeup and go natural, the Allies encouraged them to wear a lot of it. It was good for morale, the theory went, but it wasn't always possible in occupied territories and frontline countries. In France, for example, cosmetics were so scarce that women reformed lipstick tubes from melted pieces. During the war years, Eugene Schuler and Loreal made a fortune. While Schuler's personal wealth more than doubled, Loreal's sales quadrupled between France and the United Kingdom's declaration of war in late 1939 and the Allied liberation in 1944. This, of course, does not explain how Loreal's sales skyrocketed during the war. Even if the company did not make significant sales to Germans, it's impossible for Loreal to obtain the necessary raw materials, energy, and transportation without the occupiers' approval. Schuler, on the other hand, was able to conceal his involvement as an important supplier to the German war machine by hiding behind the complicated corporate structures in place in Valentine's partnership with Druckfarben. Paint, unlike cosmetics, is a highly strategic military product. Without it, no ship sails, no plane flies, and no tank rolls. Similarly, post-war investigators were unaware of the full extent of Schuler's political collaboration. On this charge, the judge concluded that Schuler demonstrated a certain activity in favor of Franco-German collaboration ideas, and that he did, in fact, belong to and contribute funds to Delonkel's Cagoule. However, Schuler claimed that he was never a member of the group. Delonkel, he claimed, enticed him into a relationship by expressing interest in his economic theories and then used this name in his propaganda. Furthermore, Schuler was able to call on a number of witnesses to back up his claims that he had sheltered Jewish employees, aided staffers who resisted forced labor in Germany, and secretly financed the resistance. Among Schuler's supporters were future President Francois Mitterrand and Schuler's future son-in-law and soon-to-be Loreal vice president, André Betancourt, both of whom were active in the resistance. Schuler, on the other hand, would give positions to his other wartime contacts. Louis Delonkel, the son of Eugene Delonkel, later joined the Spanish branch of Loreal, one of many ex-Kugelards welcomed into Schuler's company after the war. The judge ultimately recommended that all charges against Schuler be dropped. That decision cleared Schuler's slate and allowed him to continue running his businesses. If convicted, Schuler could have been removed from Loreal leadership, disgraced, imprisoned, or worse, while the company itself faced nationalization. But a combination of money, connections, and luck saved Eugene Schuler from that humiliation, and possibly even from a firing squad. Schuler was an innovator and a determined businessman. He set out to conquer the international market and built a global network of salesmen. Schuler laid the groundwork for Loreal's future in his later years. He groomed his successor, Francois Dallet, and paved the way for the brand. L'Oreal was now an all-encompassing player in the beauty industry, effectively diversifying its distribution channels beyond its traditional network of hair salons through pharmacies. And with that being said, it's time to end our video. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing videos like this. We'll see you with another interesting story.